Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of BW Applause and Everything Experiential interview series. Today, I have with me Mr. Sanjoy Roy, Managing Director, Teamwork Arts, to give us a perspective of the events industry and the future of literary festivals in the country. Thank you, Mr. Roy, for joining us.
Pleasure, Nama.
So, my very first and obvious question to you is that how have the past months of the pandemic been for Teamwork Arts? What were the major challenges? How has it helped in evolving Teamwork Arts?
So, Nama, actually, for us, it was like with everybody else, it's been a huge challenge when the lockdown happened. But in many ways, it also came at roughly the right time because many of us in Teamwork, all of us at Teamwork, are always busy being busy. So we're rushing around the world and we're catching flights and we're rolling out one festival after the other. 33 festivals in a year. So we never had time to sort of sit down and actually consolidate and assimilate. So what this did on the 23rd of or 21st of March is just brought everything to a stop, which of course was terrible. We had to postpone Hong Kong, Singapore, GLF London, Turkey. Our last festival was, I think, India by the Nile in Egypt, which finished in early March. And my last tour out, I came back to India on the 6th of March from London via Morocco because we were planning a new festival in Morocco for the summer. And I had gone there for the press conference. So I finished the press conference, came back to India only to cancel it. So what we've been able to do over this period of lockdown is, really relook at our business, relook at our digital model. Earlier, everything that we recorded, of course, we put it online. But was it online specific digital product? No, it wasn't. So over these, 6, 7 months, we've been able to roll out GLF Brave New World, which after the first month found really fabulous traction, and now 160 odd broadcasts later, we've got over 4.7 million people who viewed it, 20 odd million people who have access to it. We've rolled out Words Are Bridges, a new translation literature program. We have our Voices of Faith series to discover the philosophy behind, different aspects of religion. We've got our Kahani digital magic of storytelling for young kids. We were able to take a Meta, our theater festival, online. And of course, pretty early on, we started working on an advocacy program for the arts, for artists and artisans, because in one of my very first meetings in a task force with Vicky, we were asked by a government person, a bureaucrat and ministers to, why do artists need money? I kept saying, you have to find relief for us. And I thought that they were joking and then realized that they actually had no sense. And I had to explain to them that not every artist is a Shah Rukh Khan or a Sonu Nigam. And everybody from the Ragi in the Gurdwara to the Baul, the Kathak dancer to the Pandal maker, the lighting designer in Chandanagar to the weaver in Banaras are all part of India's creative economy. And they've got no resource to be able to take this forward. So when we realized there was this sense of ignorance in India about what the creative economy actually means, we started the Art Matters advocacy program, filming and asking artists and artisans across the cross section of India to send in, 1 minute little stories about their work, what they did. And we started putting that out, and that resulted in the first virtual art exhibition that we did to raise funds for the tribal artists called Fables of the Earth, which we did with Ojas Art. And then we did the I Believe Art Matters series, which was a 6.5 hour program with 450 artists recording a segment from their space. Everybody from A.R. Rahman and Shekhar Ravjiani to Shillong Chamber Choir to Aditi Mangaldas to the Bowls, etc. And it was fabulous, and we were able to raise with this whole program, I think 65 or 70 lakhs, and have been able to support about 5,200 artists and artisans across the country. So yes, I mean it's been very productive for us. Have we found resources? No, I think that's the $1 million question that you would have asked me next. So that jury is still out as to how will the digital arts platforms actually start paying back. But having said that, we have found income. It's not that we haven't. We have been finding income across our products. So yeah, that's a advantage.
Thank you, sir. So recently, JLF concluded its USA edition. How different was it to organize it this time?
It was very different, and the challenges were completely different, even for JLF London, for example, or Words of Bridges. Earlier, because we were geographically located to JLF London, JLF Ireland, in Belfast, JLF Adelaide in Australia, JLF Doha in Qatar, and of course the North American editions, which is Houston, Boulder, New York, and Toronto. So here, yes, of course, it was heartbreaking not to be there in person and to receive, all of the people who make it a point to come to JLF Boulder, for example, from across the United States. It was one of our most successful JLFs. People fly in. It's like JLF in the beginning years in India. Every venue was packed. The library is a stunning place. It's situated on the on the Boulder Creek. We have beautiful evenings, so it's really a place to come together. And because it was a coming together of people from South Asia, the African American Caribbean population, the Latinos, the First Nation people from the United States and Canada, and of course writers from the UK and America, it was really a salad bowl of different ideas and thoughts coming together. This time, the advantage, and again, it goes back to advantage versus disadvantage. The advantage was that we could access speakers who didn't necessarily have to be there. So, Nobel laureates, Booker Prize winners, other people who are otherwise could have been busy and would have moved from one to the other. And our per hour capacity in, say, GLF Boulder, Colorado, is about 1,500 people per hour.
Okay.
Here, our per session that we were able to reach out, our average per session reaches about 29 to 32,000 people, with some sessions, being much larger. So, it turns the whole math, differently. So one has to look at the opportunity differently. Similarly, Toronto, for example. But this year, we couldn't come together. But again, there was this possibility of reaching out beyond the geographical location. And I'll give you an example. So JLF Brave New World, if you look at the statistics, so for our international viewership, typically, say at Jaipur Literature Festival or any of other places, our largest non-Indian audiences are from the United States, then UK, then Australia, then Hong Kong, Singapore, UAE, etc., and then places like Canada, etc., France, so on and so forth. But our third largest audience in JLF Brave New World internationally is Germans, and we've never spent any marketing money, accessing Germany. And even at the Jaipur Literature Festival, Germany hasn't been, it hasn't even registered as a numerical. Saudi Arabia registered this year with 0.9% attendance, but certainly not Germany. So it's interesting how you can break out of the geography of what you are catering to. But sadly, again, is that enough? Is that experience enough? And I don't know whether you've seen any of our episodes, but our endeavor each time is to create, a special conversation. So many of our conversations are special because, of course, they're deep dive and very intimate. But we put the design into place, etc. And, many people across the world now use that template to do what we've been doing, what we started in April. So, yeah, it's been challenging, and it'll continue to be challenging. This COVID is going no place anytime soon. The world is not going to come back, at least till 2022, maybe, into a normal situation. We're looking at the next 6 or 7 months still with most of our festivals being online.
online.
But the challenge now is how do you create that opportunity to make that experience memorable?
Thank you, Mr. Roy. So I want to ask that how has the response of brands been to virtual edition of the festival? Are they supportive?
So Nama, that it's so strange, right? So even last year, 2020, when our colleagues used to go out to market for sponsors and supporters, etc., and we used to say, "This is our digital figures." I mean, for the Jaipur Literature Festival, some of our Facebook sessions have received 500,000 views, etc. Brands were very never really interested in that aspect of it at all. It didn't matter whether you had 5 million views or 1 million views, you weren't getting 1 rupee extra from brands for that. Today, it's completely changed because most brands have a protocol that if there's something on the ground, they will not be supportive of it because of the possible impact of it becoming a super spreader event.
Okay.
So today, of course, brands are far more in fact, they're only focused, what are you doing digitally? What can we access? But I think the challenge, Nama, as you know, and you all have seen it as well, the challenge is that how do we create that memory and make it different from, say, a brand advertising off Google or on Facebook or Twitter, etc.? Why will that make it a difference for them advertising on us, on our platform? And what is the cost benefit ratio to that? And therefore, what is the value attributed? And right now, we're seeing that the value attributed from on ground to digital is a differential of, it's 10% of what it used to be. So, where we would charge, say, 100 rupees equivalent, you now get 8 to 10 rupees for the same kind of delivery. And that, I think, is the big challenge, or not just for us, but for every digital player we've seen, Amazon, Flipkart, everybody. How do you do that? Because the sense then is that, digital doesn't have a cost. So it's cheap because you can record on Zoom. Not realizing that nothing changes really. Yes, the infrastructure changes, but nothing else changes. So again, for the Jaipur Literature Festival, we're trying to create, 2021, we're trying to create an on-ground event that we will shoot for broadcast to make it a digital event, keeping in mind the COVID protocol and the fact that we may not have any audiences per se. But we want to get out of the Zoom format, out into the more environmental format of creating a memory, an experience, a space, etc.
Do you think that the industry bodies are doing enough to address the concerns of the stakeholders, especially during this time?
I think the industry bodies have done a lot. I know whether it's in FICCI or whether it's EMA or whether it's with, some of the bodies that you guys are also associated with. There's a meeting every hour on the hour with state governments, with central governments. But has that been effective? I think that's the $1 million question.
Yeah.
So yes, Rajasthan has rolled out a project, for artists and artisans. Andhra Pradesh government has announced a 1,000 crore program for artists and artisans. But that's it. I don't think we've been able to make the kind of impact that we should. Not that any sector has been able to make it, having said that. But the fact that, we believe that there's 150 to 200 million people in India engaged with the creative economy. And if you see this in comparison to, say, the UK or Germany, and yes, they have much more money and therefore they can put out. Germany has announced, 3.2 billion euros of additional funding into the creative sector for 2021. UK has already announced 2.7 billion pounds of funding for the creative economy. But we haven't been able to announce even $1. There have been cutbacks in the Ministry of Culture instead of saying that, this is the time. So therefore, what's been the impact? And the problem is, Nama, that the creative industry, the creative economies come under 8 different ministries in the government of India.
Yeah.
Everything from HR to to the MEA, etc., and all the ministries in between. So, where do you start? Where do you end? And similarly with all the state governments. And how do you make that impact? How do you make the case? And when Parliament is not even in session, how do you get parliamentarians to even raise this issue? I mean, Dr. Sonal Mansingh raised it in the previous session of Parliament. I mean, to no avail, not that anything happened. But when you don't even have Parliament in session, who is finally taking your voice and making it count for something? So yeah, I think there's loads to do. It's not that industry bodies haven't been doing it, but I think the question is, how do we make it effective? How do we get government to hear us?
Yeah, absolutely. So, what are some of your plans for the 2021 edition of JLF in India that's about to come?
As I said, Jaipur Literature Festival in India, we are going ahead and doing it in February. Will be the broadcast of it. It'll be mostly digital. It'll be a day or so more than our normal festival. Of course, we expect to reach out to way more people than we would physically. We would have an equivalent number of sessions, speakers, all of that kind of stuff. But in addition, what we're hoping to do is actually, change the format in which we will be doing these sessions. So that's something you have to wait for till we make the announcements over the next coming weeks.
So, how do you see the future of arts and literary festivals in the country? Where do we stand when we compare them to their global counterparts?
I think India, because all 1.3 billion of us, whether we're literate or illiterate, doesn't matter. All of us tell stories, have grown up with stories, have traditional stories, have stories that our grandparents, our parents, our aunts, our uncles, our villages, our communities, our religions have sort of offered up. So it's a plethora across languages. So not just the 27, 28 national languages, but across the 3,000 odd dialects. Everybody has a story to share. Today, translation and the digital platform has made it already democratic, at least to the extent that you have bandwidth, made it democratic. So you can just record your story and put it online, and somebody will hopefully watch it, whether it's on Instagram or Facebook or whatever. So the vibrancy of the Indian literature platforms is enormous, and I don't think you can anymore compare it with any other country. I mean, if you look at the kind of audiences that one gets for literary festivals, the range of audiences. I mean, if you look at the UK, any of their festivals would have an average age of 55 plus, bordering on the 65. Whereas in India, whether it's the Jaipur Literature Festival, where 67% of our audiences were below the age of 29, and 80% were below, 80% were below the age of 29, and 64% were below the age of 25. So here it's a young audience that will only grow, and I think the challenge in India will be, can these festivals translate easily onto, whether it's Zoom or digital or whatever, and do they have resources to be able to manage that and market it and make sense of it? That's going to be the challenge. But I don't think we need to be in comparison with the rest of the world, because it is unique. I mean, which part of the world has the kinds of languages that we have? And then if you look at the diaspora and you look, like I said, Germany. I mean, where Germany? It's really turns the whole thing on the head.
Absolutely. So my last question is that what are some of your key learnings of the last 9 months?
Key learnings have been many. And number one is that, even within our colleagues, one of the biggest issues that we have to deal with is the mental health of everybody. How in this lockdown space are we all going to ensure that we are, at least in a space which is happy, productive, because we can't control each person's personal space.
Yeah.
And I remember a colleague saying to me that, people like you who have space, it's easy to work from home. What about people who don't have their own private space, who are having to negotiate between, child, parents, kitchen, cooking, dog, cat, goings and comings, the pressure of that. I think that's been one of the biggest, challenges. And I think the learnings are still some way away in terms of how do we, so our colleagues have been speaking to each of our colleagues one-on-one, blah, blah, blah. So, it's a challenge. Of course, it's a challenge. The second learning, I think, is that the numbers games and the reach just changes. I mean, I was telling you about JLF London. Again, the capacity of JLF London across the three venues in the British Library, and if you add British Museum in V&A, would be about 1,200 people an hour. Here, by the end of the 2.5 days of JLF London, we had 450,000 people viewing an episode. Viewing the festival. So, it changes your perception of who is your audience. So then in terms of the learning, you have to do much more slice and dice. So who is this audience? How do you cater to them? Earlier, we knew who our physical audience were. It was people who came through the door, sometimes to explore, sometimes on date night, sometimes to taste the food, and often, of course, to listen to the sessions. And then they stumbled upon an author and they were like, wow, they were blown out of their mind. Because otherwise, if you told them this is a session on mathematics, you'd get 0 people. But here, because they came to a session, they stumbled upon a session, which was so fascinating. They were completely blown away that the fact that mathematics or the black hole or astrophysics or particle physics could be spoken about so eloquently, so in such a brilliantly articulated way, and make it interesting and exciting. So that then has meant that we have to change the way that we present a session. How do we create a space and an opportunity for those speakers to have much more meaningful conversations as opposed to what we used to do at the main platform? So that's been the second. Content has really been the second learning. And third has been, now as we are emerging from being an on-ground entertainment and arts company, we're now a digital entertainment and arts company, which then immediately looks at, you then start competing with everybody else, everybody from the Baijus of the world to, or not competing, but you're certainly one of those many players. So it changes the perspective with which you have. It opens up new frontiers and new boundaries. And then, of course, the million-dollar question is, the learning in terms of, so who's paying for all of this? Where's the money coming? What are the new models, if any, to be able to make the arts pay for itself on an online platform? Complicated. I think it's still some way away before we are able to really get our head around it. But inshallah, we'll be around for a bit and we'll be able to do that. Inshallah, touch wood.